Haran's eyes widened. She felt how clumsy and heavy her body had become. It felt alien. Haran looked down at her small, soft, plump hands. She turned into a child and was horrified by the thought that she had ended up in hell. She began to beat her plump hands on the bed in alarm. But then Heron remembered that she was the daughter of the Namgung clan and a sword demon who lived to avenge her family. Looking around, Haran did not notice the guards and began to think about how she could escape from the unfamiliar room. Namgung gathered all her strength to try to break the curse, but her internal Kwai energy was gone. The thought that she had been deliberately deprived of her powers and adult body by witchcraft made Heron burst into tears. She screamed indignantly throughout the entire unfamiliar house because she had spent so much effort studying her power. An unfamiliar woman took her into her arms and immediately asked sympathetically, with a smile, what was bothering her baby. This woman turned out to be Namgung's nanny. Haran was completely confused and indignant. Had she really returned to childhood? With tears in her eyes, Namgung began to remember. Many memories have faded with time, but one of them remains firmly etched in my memory. It was at the dinner to celebrate Haran's 5th birthday that it was discovered that she was unable to learn martial arts. Haran couldn't match her brothers and sister in either intelligence or martial arts, so she heard time and again that she was a disgrace to the family. Many nights, Heron secretly pored over books, but in the Namgung family, there was no place for mediocrity, and the youngest daughter was ignored. Only a faithful nanny was always ready to lend her shoulder and be a support. No matter what they whispered behind her back, the nanny was always there and comforted Heron. But when Heron was 8, the nanny died, and Namgung lost her support and a piece of her heart. Haran recognized the nanny and burst into tears, and the nanny smiled softly in response. The nanny asked the maid to prepare a restroom for the baby, while Haran thought how strange the magic was that it could turn back time. She thought with sadness that everything that was happening now was just a hallucination. A few days later, nothing had changed. Baby Haran lay in bed all day. I ate on schedule. She was carried in arms, washed and dressed. One day, Haran woke up to the sound of a rattle. Thoughts of failed revenge filled her head. The maid picked up Haran in her arms and carried her off to change. Haran looked around and recognized her room. Expensive fabrics, rich decorations. Haran was surprised to think that she had been raised in such luxury. Haran sadly recalled that she grew up in wealth and love until her family found out that she was an ordinary child. But Haran decided to enjoy her new life. The maid returned to the room and picked up Haran in her arms to carry her back to the room. Haran decided to make the most of her new life. With only 5 years left until the turning point, Haran began to like her new life. She thought that it was nice to be a child. From the time of the Namgung family's death until her own death, Heron could not sleep peacefully. But now she felt cared for and could allow herself to relax and not think about her debt. The maid put Haran to bed and began to lament the heartlessness of the young gentlemen and ladies of the house who did not visit the baby. The maid remembered that during the clan's funeral and Heron's illness, none of them had visited the baby. She lamented in frustration while Haran thought about how quickly she had gotten used to this kind of treatment. Heron thought longingly that it was only during this period that she was considered part of the Namgung family, and she lost herself in memories. Haran turned around at the sharp knock on the door and the shouts directed at her. 2 women appeared at the door, saying that Haran was accused of attempting to poison the daughter of the leader of the Iron Blood Alliance and must be punished. The warriors, armed to the teeth, forcibly tied up Haran, who was unable to fight back. Haran was accused of a crime she did not commit. That day, her small, peaceful world was shattered into pieces. 2 warriors dragged Haran, bound by her arms, and whispers of the lords could be heard all around. The warriors pushed Heron to her knees, and she stood before the clan elder. It was Lee from the Namgung clan, the manager of the estate. He said that Heron needed to submit to the demands of the head of the Iron Blood Alliance. Haran was outraged because it was not she who poisoned the daughter of the leader of the Iron Blood Alliance. One of the alliance ambassadors pointed a sword at Heron and shouted that the daughter of his clan leader drank the tea that Heron brought and was poisoned. The elder chuckled thoughtfully and asked the ambassador to calm down, since the decision had already been made and the evidence against Heron had been confirmed. The elder of the Namgung clan confirmed that he will hand over the criminal Heron to the alliance, despite her excuses. The Iron Blood Alliance warriors openly laughed at Heron in her face, while the Namgung clan's people whispered behind her back. When she tried to justify herself, no one listened to her, and conclusions were drawn. Heron cried out that she would never do anything that would cast a shadow on the Namgung clan, because she was also part of the clan and the family. The head of the Namgung family, Namgung Choi, Heron's older brother, entered the hall. Haran thought with sadness that he was not on her side, because without the leader's consent, the warriors would not have dared to enter the main palace and take Haran away. The subjects told Choi that they would hand over Heron to the alliance, but he only asked if this was the alliance's true desire. The ambassador proudly replied that the Iron Blood Alliance and the Namgung family were allies, and handing over Heron to them was a true act of generosity. Choi Namgung sent the alliance warriors back and said that the Namgung clan would not give up its descendants to anyone. Haran looked after her brother in surprise, not understanding why he took her side when he could have denied it or pretended nothing had happened. Choi merely replied that Heron was part of the family he had sworn to protect. Haran couldn't believe him and screamed at him to give her to the alliance and not create trouble for the family, to protect the clan. She thought that the clan would have lived peacefully and calmly if she had not been born. There would have been no tragedy in the Namgung family. But Choi thought differently and told Heron that she was part of the family, so he would not give her to the alliance people. He said that Heron had been part of the family since she was born, and the Namgung clan would not abandon her. Choi sent Heron back with Kangwoo and added that he and Seongwoo would catch up with them. Songwoo carefully took out a hairpin from her hair and gave it to Heron. That day, Heron regained everything she had lost and realized that for Choi and Sunwoo, she was more precious than their lives. Heron learned that Unchun had developed several strategies for her, asking her to find Guanyi from the Golden Scale Trading Company and let him know that time was up. Haran realized how much Kanwoo treasured her, protecting her until his last breath. That day, Haran found everything she had long desired and lost everything, and then she vowed to avenge her lost family. So many years under one roof, and all Haran knew about her brothers and sister was how dear the clan was to them. She wondered why, between her and the clan, they chose her. Haran was never able to find out the answer, because she was the only one who survived from the entire clan. Little Haran's eyes widened, and a soft blue light enveloped her as she held out her chubby little hand. In front of her, her 15-year-old brother, Namgung Choi, stood with his arms crossed. He gently placed his palm on the baby's forehead and nodded with satisfaction. The temperature had dropped. Choi said he was surprised the last time Heron smiled so brightly, despite the intense heat. His words made Haran think and realize the reality of what was happening. She remembered what happened a few days ago. A gentle hand touched Namgung's hot forehead, reminiscent of a nanny's touch. Haran opened her eyes with a smile and made a pleased sound, expecting to see her beloved nanny. But she saw the surprised face of her brother, Namgung Choi. In response to the little girl's frightened mutterings, Choi smiled brightly. The Namgung clan's great sword, Namgung Choi, was a genius destined to rise above the clan after the bloody war with the blood cult. He was the embodiment of restraint and calm. His thoughts were impossible to read. When Heron was sick and refused to eat, when she dressed up in her best dresses to please him, Choi remained cold as ice. Haran thought that making her older brother smile was a pipe dream and considered the memories of his love to be just a dream. While little Haran was sick, Kanwoo secretly visited her following her older brother. And a day later, Caring Soren dropped by. The care and love of the brothers and sisters were not a dream or inspired by fever. They really came to visit the sick Haran. In Haran Namgung's memories, Soren often heard humiliation directed at her younger sister, but always proudly passed by. Kanwoo also heard the bullying and was present during it, but did nothing to stop it. Little Haran shuddered to think that their indifference might have been part of a test and a way to cultivate a strong spirit within her. Meanwhile, Choi pulled out a golden rattle with bright red rubies from his sleeve and handed the gift to little Haran. Choi waved the rattle with a serious expression, and the curious little girl watched his movements with delight. Despite her delight, Haran couldn't trust her brothers and sister. She still considered herself a disgrace and a stain on the clan, and couldn't believe in their love. Choi interrupted Haran's serious thoughts with a laugh and poked her soft, plump cheek. He watched her attempts to sulk with a smile and carefully swung a beautiful golden rattle. 5 years later, the situation could change. Haran remembered the humiliation and coldness of her family members, so she decided to trust her brother. Little Hiran proudly extended her hand towards her brother and asked him to give her the golden rattle. But Choi, with a sweet smile, put the toy away in the red chest so that the little girl wouldn't get hurt. With a loud scream, Hiran burst into tears in front of her brother. In a panic, Choi reached out to his crying sister, not knowing how to calm her down. Hiran glared back at him, not wanting to give in so easily. Then, Choi took the little girl to her lessons, and his calm, warm, and majestic aura instantly calmed Heron down, and she fell asleep. Choi remembered the first time he saw his little sister in her mother's arms and was able to hold her. She always fell asleep quickly in his arms. The next day, the maid nursed Hiran with a smile and praised her for her childish pranks, calling her cute. It was then that Hiran first thought, looking at her baby face in the mirror, that she could call herself a cutie. A random thought made Heron remember that in high society she had another nickname, the thorny flower Namgung. Rumors circulated that the impudent men, captivated by Namgung's appearance, were hurt by her razor-sharp words and cold attitude. While Hiran was recalling her past, the nanny was discussing how the second gentleman had fainted, causing the entire estate to go into an uproar. He was bedridden, and no one in the house cared about his condition or about the condition of his mistress. The maid enthusiastically listed all the gossip of the estate and mentioned the employment of her beloved nanny, Hiran, which aroused the child's curiosity. The nanny appeared on the threshold with a serious, frowning face and scolded the maid for her carelessness. Hiran couldn't bear to look at the upset maid, so she decided to cheer up the gloomy nanny. The little girl got tangled up in the long sleeves of her clothes and started dancing with a wide grin. The nanny picked up Hiran in her arms with a gentle smile and hugged her. Hiran snuggled closer to her nanny and inhaled the familiar scent of orchids, causing her eyelids to grow heavy, and she fell into a pleasant sleep. She was pulled out of her sleep by a man's voice, persistently scolding the nanny. Hiran recognized him as Elder Lee, the man who would hand her over to the Iron Blood Alliance in the future. He remembered the leader and the Namgung brothers, their strengths and hidden talents that were revealed over time. Elder Lee said that the previous head of the family brought the Namgung brothers and sister in from the street, and they looked like dirty ragamuffins. Within a year, each of them had taken a worthy place in the clan and gained universal recognition, revealing their talent. According to the elder, little Heron had hidden potential, so he urged the nanny to make the little girl trust her. The scent of orchids made little Hiran wonder if the nanny always smelled of flowers, just like Elder Lee, and if it was a coincidence. One day, the nanny yelled at the maid for giving Heron ordinary food. Young Hiran couldn't stand the screams and confessed to her nanny that she herself asked the maid to give her some regular food. The nanny leaned over Hiran and cupped her face, asking the little girl to trust only her. Hiran wanted to object and defend the maid, but the nanny was adamant. The nanny monitored the food that Hiran ate, the clothes she wore, and her social circle, and Hiran perceived her gestures as care. But the more Hiran followed her nanny's advice, the more alone she felt. Looking back on her past, Hiran couldn't help but think about how much her nanny loved her and was sincere with her. Little Hiran couldn't believe that even her nanny, the only person who cared for her, didn't love her. Little Hiran's thoughts were interrupted by a frightened Soren, who suddenly appeared on the threshold of her younger sister's room. Choi Namgung's twin sister, Namgung Seorin, was always by the young master's side and ensured the family's stability from within. Throughout the Murim Plains, she was spoken of as a talented lady from the Namgung clan, a model of elegance like a lotus. Seeing her scared was unusual for Heron. An excited Soren picked up the baby in her arms and checked her temperature. A warm look and a gentle touch on her back helped Hiran calm down and snuggle closer to her sister's body. Hiran thought sadly that perhaps she was too old to remember how warmly her brothers and sister had treated her. Perhaps she had forgotten everything because of the shock. The family's current kindness only further confused Heron and her feelings, and she could not distinguish truth from lies. Hiran already knew how her family's fate would turn out, so she burst into tears in her sister's arms from strong emotions. Hiran didn't strive for money or wealth. She wanted simple human warmth and couldn't fully enjoy it now, being in the body of a child. She knew that fate would inexorably separate her from the family she had once again found. Hearing her younger sister's cries, Soren couldn't hold back her own tears. She confessed to Hiran that she had been poring over a mountain of documents for days and nights in order to quickly be free and see her little sister. Soren cried, not knowing how to calm the baby, and Heron looked at her and couldn't believe that she saw her sister like this. The sister did not cry when the fire devoured the family estate. She did not cry when the family was attacked. Soren continued to smile as she and Choi remained behind, holding off the attackers until the end, at the cost of their own lives. To Haran's surprise, the steadfast Soren complained to her about her brothers, about relatives from side branches, about merchants who did not take her into account because of her age. Soren was dissatisfied with the state of affairs in the clan and angry at her own powerlessness, holding the frightened Haran in her arms. According to Soren, under the previous head, the relatives did not dare open their mouths, but now they considered her and Choi easy prey. They squandered the family fortune piece by piece and reveled in wealth that was not theirs. Thus, the unwavering Soren appeared before her younger sister as just a young girl who was tired of the burden of responsibility for her family. Everything she was doing now was a first for her. Whether it was managing the family's affairs or taking care of young Haran, she was only 15. Haran couldn't bear to see her sister cry and smiled widely to cheer her up. Soren's expression immediately changed, and she hugged the baby closer, her smile blossoming. Soren always knew how to find common ground with people, but when relatives asked about marriage, she swore to remain loyal to the clan and not marry. Haran thought that even then, it was clear that her sister had a lively and rebellious character. Haran never found out why her family decided to side with her at the last moment, but she was determined not to let the family fall. She is no longer a thorny flower, capable of defending herself only with sharp words. She is the cruel demon Namgung Heron, and she is not easily broken. On the morning of the new day, the maid tried to feed the dissatisfied Haran, but to no avail. Even the strict nanny couldn't influence the little girl. The maid was worried about Haran's health, but the nanny was adamant and asked not to force the baby to eat if she did not want to. Little Heron didn't need food. The twins Choi and Soren carefully brought food to her chambers every evening. The baby refused to eat in the mornings. Partly because of the nanny, she began to suspect selfish motives in her care. The maid picked up the baby in her arms and perked up. She began to tell Haran the latest news from the estate. The meeting of the 5 great families was scheduled to take place in a month, so the young head was currently extremely busy. These were the 5 great clans: Tang, Peng, Jagal, Moyon, and Namgun. Every year, the 5 Murim clans met to determine the current state of affairs and to demonstrate a model of harmony and interrelationship between the clans. In reality, this was an eternal clarification of the clan's leadership. Haran was preparing to cause a stir at the meeting and take revenge on the enemies who did not come to the aid of her family. Haran wanted to expose the nanny. She cried incessantly for 4 days in her arms, and the family began to worry. The blame for the baby's illness fell on the nanny. The intuition of a direct descendant of Namgung told Heron that the nanny was not on her side. The nanny was a subject of the Namgung family, so she was responsible for the baby's condition in front of the clan. If the baby's condition worsens, the nanny will be the first to be blamed, and the clan members will suspect something is wrong. The nanny was too busy keeping her secrets, so she didn't call the doctor, which upset Haran and made her doubt her nanny even more. The little girl decided that the meeting of the 5 clans was the perfect time to expose the nanny. Unbeknownst to the nanny, the maid called a doctor, concerned about Haran's condition. The maid was genuinely worried about Haran and said that the baby needed someone who could take care of her. Neither the head of the family, nor Haran's relatives, nor even the nannies, according to the maid, could provide the necessary care. The maid spent a lot of time with the baby, telling her about her brothers and sisters, believing that one day Heron would have a reliable support. She admitted that she was ready to give her life for Heron. The next day, the nanny was interrupted by the appearance of a man. It was the Namgung family's doctor, Nogak. From the doorway, he asked the nanny why she wasn't concerned about the baby's illness and lack of appetite. The doctor leaned over the sleeping Namgung, amazed by her serene appearance. The baby's eyes suddenly opened, and she burst into a scream. Her cries echoed throughout the clan's estate and disturbed the healer, nanny, and maid who were bending over her. The doctor touched the baby's hand and said that the child's energy was exhausted. She had been screaming and enduring discomfort for so long. The nanny continued to stand her ground and said that the baby cried more when she saw strangers. The doctor reproached the nanny for her poor answer, and she burst into indignation. The doctor did not pay attention to the nanny's words, took the baby in his arms, and carried her out of the room. The nanny tried to stop the doctor, but he pushed her away, saying that he would report the baby's condition to the head of the clan. The nanny couldn't restrain herself and called the baby a little devil in front of the doctor, letting it slip that the elder would be displeased. The doctor was not surprised by the nanny's outburst. He suspected that she was in league with the elder, so he silently carried little Heroine out of the room. The nanny went to the clan head to blame the court physician for Heroine's illness. The nanny fell to her knees before the head and asked for pity. She claimed that she was the only one in the estate who cared for the baby. The young gentleman did not believe the nanny and accused her of indifference. The nanny couldn't believe that the young lady of the Namgung family, rejected by everyone, would become an obstacle. Winning her favor and love turned out to be very difficult. The nanny tried to dissuade the head of the clan, but to no avail, he drove her away. The nanny accused the clan leader of indifference to his own sister, recalling that he was not there when she lost her father and suffered from a fever. But the head was firm and found the nanny guilty of causing harm to a member of the Namgung family. The guards grabbed the nanny and led her out of the hall. Haran thought with joy that she was now free from the nanny's influence. Choi turned around worriedly as Heron fell asleep. The doctor handed the baby over to Choi, saying that now her older brother should take care of her. Choi remembered Unchan's important words. Heron was the family's weak point, so it was decided not to show the slightest affection towards her. Since then, Choi became estranged from his sister, and there was no turning back. Choi knew that Unchan would be angry with him, but he couldn't move away from the baby and pulled her closer to him, a smile blossoming on his face. An unknown person appeared in the sleeping baby's bedroom. The feeling of someone else's presence disturbed the sleeping Haran. The baby woke up with a loud cry and turned around. The stranger's face seemed vaguely familiar to her. It was Unchan, blood streaming down his lips, telling the adult Heron to run from the house and save herself. Namgung Wungchun had always been in poor health, but recently his cough had gotten worse, and he almost fainted in front of little Heron. Haran was hysterical. She wanted to help her brother, but her weak, childish body was powerless. The baby managed to turn over in the crib on her own and almost fell, but Unchan caught her and hugged her. Unchan laid the baby on the bed, and she grabbed his bloody finger with a smile. Unchan took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped Heron's palms. The little girl's actions seemed careless to him, but he was caring and devoted to his little sister. Neither Unchan nor the others wished any harm on Heron, but the little girl was waiting for the moment when they would become disappointed in her. When the baby fell asleep, Choi Namgung looked into the bedroom. Unchan told his brother that the baby was healthy. The doctor's predictions turned out to be correct. Unchan left the bedroom, saying that he would show the family a worthy example of caring for the baby. The baby's appetite returned, and the maid was glad that Heron had recovered. The maid Soso was worried about Heron because she was under the nanny's supervision, but all the servants confirmed that Soso was on the baby's side and was going to call a doctor. Now the nanny shares the most current rumors of the Namgung clan with Heron. So Soso reported that the second young master, Unchan, was coughing up blood again, but he was already recovering and was getting ready to visit the baby. And young Mrs. Soren severely scolded one of the managers yesterday. Kanvu had an unbearable character and scolded his servants for every little thing. The little girl thought sadly that Kanvu's appearance would only make her headache worse. So also reported that the nanny had already been punished. Elder Jang and Elder O discussed how they should proceed now to destroy the clan. Together with the courtier, they decided to increase the dose of medicine for Unchan in order to make his illness worse. The plan had to be completed before the young gentleman, with his keen intuition, figured everything out. Unchan was preparing to take a new dose of medicine. Little Heron was lying in her bed, bored. Choi and Soren hadn't visited her for a long time, and Namgung Wungchan came to the baby and watched her from the corner. He didn't pick up the baby, didn't feed her like his older brother and sister. He watched silently and left. After another coughing fit, Unchan dropped his spoon. Namgung noticed that his silver spoon had darkened. The little girl extended her hand, trying to stop Unchan. She knew that silver cutlery changed color when it came into contact with poison. Namgung Unchan was in poor health and therefore could not learn martial arts. But thanks to his outstanding intellect, he was considered a brilliant strategist of the clan. He clearly knew that they were trying to poison him, but he did nothing. This meant that there was a force behind the poisoning that could not be underestimated. Haran began to think about what she should do to warn her family about the danger. Then the baby went on a hunger strike again. Her crying did not stop. So wanted to call a doctor. But Choi understood what the little girl's plan was. She made it clear who she needed and who she didn't. He realized that she needed a certain person and asked to call Uncheon. As soon as Uncheon appeared, the baby stopped crying, and Choi noticed it. Choi asked Uncheon with a smile to feed the baby, but his brother grumpily refused. The baby cried again upon hearing the answer and only calmed down in Uncheon's arms. Uncheon couldn't put the baby in danger by showing his affection. The elders were worried about him. Uncheon admitted that he took poison on purpose to lull the elders into a false sense of security. He urged Choi not to play family games, but to focus on retaining his own title. Uncheon was afraid that the plan would be revealed, but Choi urged him to calm down. Uncheon was terrified. He didn't want to put his sister in danger, but he denied it in front of his family. Namgung Wongchun was a natural-born genius, capable of calculating 1,000 moves ahead, but he had no understanding of his own feelings. Meanwhile, Choi revealed that not long ago, the Tang family from Sichuan went to the province for a meeting of clan leaders and was attacked by unknown assailants on the border of Anhui. Heroine was horrified. She could not understand who dared to attack a clan known for its merciless revenge on those who offended them. Choi suspected the elders, but according to Uncheon, they never left any traces. Uncheon received a secret document with a detailed plan to attack the clan and corrected the start date of the operation. Because of Uncheon, the attack did not occur while the clan was in residence. Choi was horrified. The plan could have turned into a complete disaster for the Namgung clan, but Uncheon said with a smile that collapse would have awaited another Namgung family, a family of traitors. Choi waited for the destruction of internal enemies so that the clan would be freed and would belong to a real family. The elders wanted to use the attack on the Tang clan and the poisoning of Uncheon as an excuse to strip Choi of his title. The elders couldn't touch Uncheon because of his fatal illness, so the safest place for his sister was next to him. Uncheon was ready to sacrifice his life for his family. He said that everything would end after the clan meeting. On the following day, the maid brought lunch to the little girl and Uncheon. Namgung couldn't come to terms with her brother's carelessness. He took the poison too calmly. In her past life, Namgung had suffered from poisons, so she knew the danger they posed to her brother. Uncheon kept baby's cutlery separately and fed his sister himself. Uncheon didn't look at his food while he ate. Namgung was afraid that her brother's food might also be poisoned, and she screamed. Food from the spoon fell onto Uncheon's sleeve. Uncheon turned around worriedly, while Heron chewed on his sleeve with satisfaction. A small dose of poison was supposed to give Heron indigestion and force the family to stop the reckless brother from taking poison. But a small dose of poison caused a feeling of heat, and the baby began coughing up blood. Uncheon, shouting for the doctor and his older brother, carried the baby out of the room. The next 2 days after the treatment were to decide Heron's fate. Uncheon asked his older brother if he wanted to continue with his plan or allow Uncheon to sacrifice himself for the family. Choi admitted that Uncheon's decision to let himself be poisoned to expose the conspiracy was the easiest one. But he also admitted that it was a mistake not to stop his brother from the very beginning. Uncheon flared up and admitted that he was ready to make any sacrifice to protect his family and could take the future of the clan into his own hands. Because of the incident with his sister, Choi called a clan council, including the elders, so that Uncheon could stop taking poison. From the very beginning, Choi had no intention of going along with Woncheon's plan to prevent him from dying. The weakened Uncheon lost consciousness and collapsed at the feet of his older brother. Meanwhile, rumors were circulating in the clan's estate. The head of the family burst into the elders' quarters and took them away with him. The servants suspected that they were the ones who poisoned the baby and Mr. Uncheon. The baby kept waking up and falling asleep because of the poison, and one evening she opened her eyes because of a shadow hanging over the bed. It was Uncheon. He looked refreshed. The baby was able to survive thanks to him. He found an antidote in time. Uncheon was touched and began to cry. He admitted that the baby was very dear to him. Uncheon was very scared and was afraid that something bad would happen to his sister. He had a hunch about what the future held for the clan, and Heron promised him that this time her brother's fears would not come true. The little girl snuggled up to her brother and wiped away his tears. Before, Heron thought that her very appearance disgusted her brother, but if she was in trouble, he always came to her aid. In his past life, due to a misunderstanding with Seo Tan, Tan Ju-hyun, the head of the Tan clan, wanted to poison Heron, but Unchun prevented this from happening. When the family was attacked, he was the first to come to his sister. Just one small touch from Heron made Unchun laugh and calm down. For Ja Woon-chun, the son of the head of the black cult, Heron's touch would mean nothing, as he didn't consider her part of the family. But now everything was different. Unchun loved the baby. Unchun promised that he would deal with everyone who hurt his little sister. So was worried about Heron's health and burst into tears when she saw the happy baby. Unchun continued to watch his sister and did not allow suspicious people to approach her. There was a clan meeting scheduled for today, and So announced with a smile that the little girl would have a special guest. It was the young master, Choi Nam-gung. He greeted the little girl with a warm smile. Since the evening when the baby was poisoned, Choi had changed a lot and now showed his love for his sister openly. Meanwhile, Unchun Nam-gung entered the hall and introduced his younger sister and older brother to the stranger. It was the head of the Tang clan from Sichuan, Tang Huoyan, the king of poisons. He approached Choi and little Heron with a request to examine them. He checked the chief's pulse and found symptoms of poisoning from the cursed blood poison. The elders were horrified by the news and had doubts, but Tang Hoan was adamant. Choi said the unrest was caused by news of the emergence of a clan that had long been considered harmful and destroyed. The elders became worried. Haran suspected the elders of involvement in the poisoning. Choi specifically brought in an outside expert to confirm his suspicions about the culprits. He holds the title of head of the family, but many in the clan disagree with this, so he can use the influence of the Poison King, an independent expert. The elders confirmed that the past elders had committed a terrible act. The head of the Sichuan Tang clan admitted that the poisoning was caused by the cursed blood poison. If the elders had acted differently, they would have been considered accomplices. According to the Murim Alliance's precepts, the elders would be executed by the special forces, and their desire to please the Namgung clan meant that the alliance was not so strong. Anchun held the baby closer to him when Tang Hoan called her a lovely child. Tan Hoan asked if the little girl would be attending the banquet, and Unchun coughed demonstratively. The leader thoughtfully dropped that he would be glad to meet Unchun and the little girl at the evening. A subject called out to the chief and reported that young Master Juhong had disappeared. The worried head of the Tang clan warned Choi and went to look for the young master. Unchun watched him warily, holding the baby in his arms. Young Mr. Juhin was smiling and active. He found entertainment at the Namgung estate and a new friend. Young Kangwoo Namgung became friends with Juhyun of the Tang clan. Meanwhile, there were disputes between the elders at the estate. Elder Jingan was worried that the abandonment of their families by two elders would become a problem if the Supreme Council found out about it. Elder Chol Hote admitted that they were not the ones who used the cursed blood potion to poison Unkol. If the Murim Alliance intervened, suspicion might fall not on the clan head, but on the elders. Elder Gokshol admitted that they were cornered. The elders began to discuss who benefited from replacing the poison. Suspicion fell on the head of the Namgung clan. The elders speculated about whether Choi Namgung could have used the deadly poison of a long-destroyed cult on his own brother to achieve his goal. One of the elders could have been a traitor. The elders decided to use the nanny to find the traitor. Elder Gokchul said that the plan to crush the Namgung clan lasted for 10 years, and the cursed blood potion disrupted it. Elder Gokchul was the one who destroyed the herb cult. Now the elders had to cover their tracks and prepare for a possible escape. The little girl in her brother's arms was indignant at their arrival at the meeting. Enchanting dances, maids in beautiful clothes, an abundance of delicious food on the tables, and the curious Mr. Junhong, who never left Unchon and the baby's side. In the future, Junhong will receive the title of Poisonous Dragon. But for now, he was a sweet child who wanted to play with little Heron. He was talkative and actively tried to attract the little girl's attention. Junhong had been planting bugs on Namgung, poisoning drinks, and being late for meetings, and he was behaving exactly the same way that day. Haran chased him away, expecting him to come with more taunts. Jong-hoon saw Haran as lonely and sympathized with her, so he showed his attention through mockery. He was worried that Haran was disgusted by his sincere sympathy. Haran knew that Jong-hoon was deliberately trying to attract her attention, and this trait irritated her greatly. His behavior reminded him of Haran in childhood. She also tried to attract the attention of her relatives in every possible way. Young Jong-hoon couldn't accept the fact that the little girl didn't pay attention to him. He thought she hated him because he was the heir of the Poison clan. Young Jong-hoon brought back unwanted sad memories for the little girl. In the past, she tried just as desperately to earn her family's love. Jong-hoon, with a joyful smile, promised to return and pay attention to the baby again. The leader called Unchon to him. The little girl noticed that there were no heads of other clans visible nearby. Due to a strange potion, the meeting started earlier than expected. Unchon began to look for someone to leave his little sister with. Soren appeared with a smile and a warm greeting. Soren volunteered to hold her little sister, while Unchon spoke with the clan leader. Soren admitted that she missed her baby. Soren didn't mince words and shared with the little girl why she hadn't been able to visit her for so long. The head of the clan invited Soren to him. The little girl found it strange that the leader was calling Unchon separately. Without Heron, they were both poisoned, and there was no point in separating them. The little girl became agitated when she and her sister were led in the other direction. Soren promised to protect her baby. Both sister and brother knew about the danger, but they knowingly exposed themselves to it. The little girl heard that the head of the clan needed her. The little girl thought that they wanted to kill her or even kidnap her. She began to wonder why the headman needed her and her sister. Haran burst into tears in her sister's arms to get her attention. The servant was worried about the baby's crying and threatened to calm the child down so as not to provoke the head. The servant drew his sword to attack Soren, but the unknown young man parried his blow. The two fighters released the strength and power of their swords to strike each other. The stranger confidently took the blow, protecting Soren and the baby. He knocked the sword out of the hands of the attacking servant. The little girl saw a cut-off piece of cloth with an emblem fly over her. She caught the piece of cloth in her palm with a joyful smile. Holding the baby in her arms, Soren barely managed to dodge the flying dagger. The stranger urged Soren to flee and promised to detain the servant. Soren, hugging the baby, ran. It was a thwarted kidnapping, and Soren was a far more valuable hostage, as she was the recognized daughter of the Namgung family. Unlike little Heron, Heron was sure that the traitors knew the exact time of the meeting and were well acquainted with the Namgung estate. This was the work of someone from the Namgung clan. Soren and Haran were able to escape from the estate. Soren was wounded in the shoulder. A servant with a dagger appeared behind Soren. He took the sisters to an unfamiliar place in the forest. Soren stated that the place was too dusty for the already frequently ill baby. When the man left, Soren began to look around the room. Someone's small hands grabbed onto the window frame. It was young Jong-hoon. He looked into the room with interest and concern, and exclaimed joyfully when he saw that the baby was safe. Namgung Kangwoo appeared behind him. Soren exclaimed indignantly when she saw her brother and the young master. Kanvu ignored his sister's concerns, and a quarrel was brewing between them. The servant grabbed Junhong and Kangwoo by the scruff of their necks and threw them towards Soren and Heron. He ordered the windows to be boarded up so that the prisoners could not escape. Jong-hoon immediately asked the baby if she was okay. Soren shared that they were caught by bad people, and she would definitely protect her little sister. Jong-hoon promised that he would also protect the baby. Meanwhile, Kanvu was already preparing a plan of revenge against his offenders. He was skilled in punishment and did not want to let offenders go so easily. Kanvu was not going to sit still and was getting ready to get out. Soren helped Kanvu climb onto her shoulders, and he looked out the window. But instead of climbing out the window, Kanvu began to hit the boards. He was able to break through the boards because he had been training and studying martial arts for a long time. Jong-hoon looked at Kangwoo with admiration and asked if Kangwoo had run away before. Instead of answering, Kanvu crawled between the boards to freedom. Kanvu decided that the baby had to get out first. Otherwise, the kidnappers would return and execute everyone. Soren doubted whether Kanvu would be able to safely deliver her sister to her older brothers. Kanvu reasoned that it would be easier for his sister to escape when there were no hostages. Soren trusted Kanvu and made a cone out of her clothes to deceive the criminals. Kanwoo, with Junho and Heron in his arms, began to wait. Soren heard footsteps and started, hugging the bundle of clothes tighter, as if protecting it. The nanny appeared on the threshold. Soren was surprised. They had no right to let the nanny out without the permission of the family council. The nanny confirmed Soren's suspicions about the bribe. Otherwise, she could not have been released from prison. The irritated nanny muttered that in the consanguinity system, not everyone has the surname Namgung and is loyal to the head. They have their own ambitions and goals, and they want to overthrow the leader and gain power. The nanny planned to feed the baby poison and then give her the antidote in order to manipulate the family. Soren laughed and told the nanny to go to hell. The threat to her sister's life forced Soren to pull herself together and stand up for her family. The blame for poisoning Namgung Wunchon with the cursed blood potion fell on the Ping clan, and the leader Ping Inhyuk was outraged. The main ingredient of the cursed blood potion was an extremely rare herb that was kept in the Ping clan. The clan leader Zhigal reasoned. Elder Chol Hote confirmed that the ingredient was brought through the Zhigal clan's trade routes. The head of the Moan clan, Hingon, doubted that the secret recipes from the destroyed herbal cult had not been found anywhere. The head of the Namgung clan held a council without notifying the Murim alliance. Hengan wanted to find out their motives. He couldn't believe that the Namgung brothers were so reckless as to take on the other clans alone. The Namgun did not notify the Murim alliance because they relied on the centuries-old ties between the great clans and had no intention of turning the heads into enemies. The Namgung family only wanted to find those involved and bring them to justice. They did not want a war between clans. The blame for the poisoning with the potion lay with all the clans, so the Namgung family could be subjected to ridicule and humiliation if the accusation affected the honor of the families. When Namgung Sogwa decided to take in 5 children, whose mothers he didn't even know, everyone thought it was the end of the Namgung clan. But Choi Namgung grew up quickly, and even under pressure from other clans, he did not give in and kept his head held high. The Namgung clan had no intention of making the poisoning incident public. Choi proposed that the families responsible for the incident pay compensation and resolve the conflict peacefully. Meanwhile, Kangwoo fled from the forest with the baby and Juhyun. They hid in a building next to the palace to escape their pursuers. The little girl anxiously grabbed Kanva by the collar and pulled him towards her. Kanwoo handed the baby over to Junghoon and told him to hide while he distracted the pursuers. The little girl was worried. What was happening was reminiscent of her last moments with her family from the past. Kanwoo was covered in bloody bruises, but never complained of pain or discomfort. He confidently gave instructions to Junhong so that he could protect young Haran. Kanwoo's image reminded Haran of his adult self. He asked Haran to run. Kanwoo shouted that the clan had not taught Haran fighting techniques, treated her like trash, and that she should not be attached to her family and run away. The pursuers caught up with them, and Kanwoo sent Haran to flee. Kanwoo promised to return and lied. Finally, he asked Haran to live, no matter how hard it was for her. He was younger now, and Haran couldn't let him die recklessly. Kanwoo touched his sister's hand and said again that he would return. Junghoon ran towards the estate, hugging the baby to himself and calming her down. He said that he would return Haran to his older brothers, and Kanwoo would return. One of the pursuers noticed Junghoon and the baby and spat a poisoned silver needle at them. Haran felt like she was losing her loved ones again and was getting closer to her own death. Junghoon put out his hand and protected the baby from the poisoned needle. He hugged the baby and smiled reassuringly. Junghoon called out to the guards and asked where his grandfather was. He screamed that they were trying to kidnap the baby. The guards were horrified. One of the guards brought Junghoon and the baby to the head of the Choi clan. The head of the Tang clan was horrified, as was Choi. They saw their injured juniors. Young Junhong reported that the baby was about to be kidnapped and locked in a barn with Soren. The little girl tried to warn her older brother. Their sister was still in danger. Shaki whispered to the little girl that a shadow squad had already been sent for Soren. Haran was worried that she couldn't warn anyone because she couldn't talk yet, couldn't walk, and couldn't escape. Junghoon said that Kangwoo led the pursuers away, but he and the baby were hit with poisoned needles. Junghoon was able to protect the baby because he was immune to poison and caught the poisoned needle. The head of the Tang clan was angry that his grandson had been attacked and harmed. Chief Tan said that he would help the Namgung clan carry out a cleanup and find all those involved in the disaster. Choi concluded the clan meeting and postponed the second one for the next day. Choi sent the Dragon Spear squad to search for Gangwoo and check the dungeon where the nanny and the former elders were. Unchon was surprised. Usually his older brother was merciful to enemies and did not order them to be killed. When the elders stopped shunning any methods, it became pointless to fight them with traditional methods. Choi could not protect his sister like that. Namgung Choi, who valued integrity above all else, quickly changed when it came to his sister. Namgung's hope grew that Choi would not abandon her in the future, even if she was unable to learn martial arts. Kanwoo and Soren returned to the estate. They were safe, but the maid tried to send young Kanwoo to the medical ward. The estate fell into the usual chaos from the moment the family was reunited. Kanvu burst into tears when he was forbidden to approach his sister and look at her. Kanvu was covered in bruises that he had not had when he went to distract his pursuers. Haran decided to repay the debt and gave away the hidden piece of clothing with the emblem. The family leaned over the emblem in surprise. Thanks to the intense interrogation that Soren carried out on the nanny, the circle of suspects became clear. The Tang clan lent a helping hand, enraged by the attack on the heir, so the situation was resolved quickly and quietly. But no one in the family could make out the emblem. Headmaster Tang dropped by the medical building and inquired about the baby's health. He himself came to visit his grandson, and he decided that it would be a great idea for Haran and her grandson to meet again. Anchan declined, citing poor health, and the head of the Tang clan remarked that he looked forward to seeing them at subsequent meetings of the great clans. Anchan stopped the leader to ask him a question. The incident during the meeting affected the Tang clan. The leader could have demanded any compensation, but they did not ask for anything. Anchan wanted to know why the head of the Tang clan was so loyal to the Namgung family. The head admitted that his clan owed a lot to the father of the Namgung family. He simply paid off his debt. The clan leader's face had the same sad expression as Junhong's in the past. With him, he was laid to rest forever. Junhong had already recovered and was happy to see his grandfather and baby Heron. In the past, Heron did not attend Juhyun's funeral, and this time she decided to give the boy a chance. She smiled warmly at him. Junhong looked at the baby with delight. He said that he wanted a little sister like her. Junhong already had a cousin, Tanso, but he wanted a beauty like Heron. Hearing the young master's words, Unchul said that the Namgung clan does not give its children to anyone, and he became angry. The head of the Tang clan stood up for his grandson and said that he was considerate and caring and adored children. Anchun gave in and handed the baby over to young Jonghoon. Jonghoon happily sat with little Heron and protected her sleep. Jonghoon noticed that the baby smelled of loneliness, just like him. He had a grandfather, an aunt and uncle, and a cousin, So. But he still felt lonely. He admitted that he didn't want the baby to experience the same feelings and promised to be there for her. The little girl laughed and hugged Jonghoon. She agreed to see the young master so that he would not feel lonely. The young gentleman refused to go home. Grandfather didn't understand what the problem was. The Namgung family watched in amazement as Jonghoon became hysterical, and he kept repeating that he had promised the little girl to protect her. The grandfather grabbed the little rascal, angry at his stubbornness. The young gentleman admitted that he really likes the baby, and he wants to stay with her forever. But the grandfather was adamant and ordered the carriage to be prepared. Jonghoon called out to the little girl and asked her not to forget him. But it was Heron who didn't want Jonghoon to forget her. Clan meetings were held every 4 years, and by the next one, Heron would no longer be considered part of the family. Kanwoo was indignant that he was not invited to say goodbye to the young master of the Tang clan. Choi didn't let his younger brother say goodbye, lest he cause chaos again. Having gathered the entire family, Choi announced that the torn emblem belonged to a warrior under the command of the Council of Elders. The Council of Elders consisted of those who had repeatedly proven their loyalty to the Namgung family and had excellent combat training. The council has access to records of secret martial arts scrolls, with which they develop and protect the secret techniques of the Namgung clan. Of the 12 elders, 3 turned out to be traitors. But the investigation stalled, so the leader decided to intervene personally, sensing a threat. Choi said that for the Namgung family, protecting descendants comes before tradition. The clan's children are the top priority. Choi and Soren immediately sent Unchun to harden himself in combat trials and investigate the traitors, while the elders took care of the baby. Choi and Wonchun agreed to take care of their sister together, but Soren was against it. Soren was busy keeping the books for Unchun, and the entire administration was in a state of reorganization. Soren was ready to work and look after the baby. Unchun supported his sister's idea and also volunteered to work and look after his little sister. The baby always fell asleep quickly in his arms. Soren immediately shamed her brother, saying that he had been asking the maids how to properly rock the baby. Kanvu asked to give the baby to him. He had a lot of free time. The elders were not thrilled with the idea. Anchun suggested giving the baby the right to choose the nurse herself. Soren was indignant. It was an unfair decision, because Anchun spent a lot of time with Heron. Small children don't do much, so someone who wouldn't bother her too much would be suitable for the little one. A week later, the baby had to choose who would take care of her. A real war broke out. The family brought toys embroidered with stones and decorations, and sheets made of the purest silk, even antidotes that can neutralize any poison. The little girl was delighted with the attention. As a result, instead of a competition for the little girl's attention, everything turned into a race in which everyone wanted to give their little sister more gifts than the others. So continued to spend time with the happy little girl and told her the latest gossip about the estate. Young Kanwoo broke several expensive swords, tore silk curtains, and as punishment, his allowance was cut again. It turned out that he even had to sell his own things to bring gifts to the baby. That's why, after the family meeting, Namgung Choi insisted on a sword fight and then scolded Kangwoo for a long time. In the past, Namgung had never been able to see a training match with the boundless heaven's sword technique. When Namgung watched her brothers, her heart skipped a beat with delight. Namgung Kangwoo's fighting style was sharper and more powerful than his sister's, and Namgung Choi's movements were refined and precise. Haran observed the boundless heaven's sword technique for the first time. When Haran turns 5, she will be able to learn the same technique. But Haran knew that this would not happen. She would never be given a sword or taught powerful techniques. Namgung wanted to hold a sword in her hands at least once more. She clasped her chubby, childish hands in frustration. The next morning, Kanva visited the baby. With a smile, Kanvu shared that he had brought the little girl a gift. It was a damn doll, all tattered with empty eyes. The little girl was scared, and then she looked closely at the toy. The doll was very well taken care of. It was darned, smelled nice, and even had a name embroidered on it. Kanvu was eagerly awaiting the baby's reaction to the gift. Namgung snuggled up to the toy with a smile and squealed contentedly, wanting to make her brother happy. Kangwoo admitted that this toy was given to him by his mother, the head of the Namgung clan. According to Kanvu, the doll was supposed to drive away nightmares and protect the baby. Kanwoo didn't have the money to buy the little girl a better toy, but he said the doll was very dear to him, so he gave it to his little sister. Kanvu watched with a smile as the little girl hugged his favorite toy. In the evening, Choi and Wunshin found a cute picture in the baby's bedroom. Haran and Kanwoo fell asleep sweetly together. The toy the baby was hugging scared Unchun. Kanvu treasured the toy, but now he gave it to someone else, which proved his strong affection for his little sister. Choi gently touched the baby's hair and thought that the former head of the Namgung family, Namgung Sogwan, would be pleased to see how much she had grown. He was the greatest disgrace of the cult of the righteous path, an exile whose way back was closed. Choi couldn't forget the day the exile appeared on the threshold of the Namgung clan's refuge in the midst of a raging storm. Choi saw many who burn like flames, driven by a goal known only to them, those who disappear after achieving their goal, leaving no trace. Choi believed that Namgung Sogwan would end his life exactly like this. Appearing at the threshold, Sogwan immediately asked Choi's name. Sogwan admitted that he had been looking for Choi for a very long time. Sogwan was looking for Choi to return to him everything that should have belonged to him by right of the future head. Choi refused to follow the previous leader without Soren. Soren and Choi's mothers died on the same day, leaving the children alone and unable to live so long without each other. Choi's instincts screamed at him to not let this chance pass, but he couldn't leave without Soren. After some thought, Sogwan agreed to take the 2 children. The children had to follow the Sogwan legend about the twins and decide which of them would be older. The clan people couldn't believe that Choi and Soren were the children of the previous head, but they could not deny the outward resemblance between Choi and the former head in his youth. Sogwan was confident that everything would go smoothly once the clan's people saw Choi. Choi couldn't believe how much he looked like the previous head. Sogwan admitted that people are not talking about his pathetic and greedy father, but about his brother, whom Choi resembles in appearance. Sogwan's brother was Choi's father, and it was he who was initially supposed to become the head of the clan. Sogwan felt uncomfortable talking about the past. The children sensed this from the moment his voice changed, filled with hatred, resentment, and anger. The children didn't ask any unnecessary questions because it didn't matter. A couple of years later, the children acquired a younger brother who smelled strongly of medicinal herbs. And a few years later, the second youngest, who writhed in my arms and screamed like an angry cat. Sogwan wanted Choi to take over after his death, and for his brothers and sister to become direct descendants of the Namgung clan. The leader was indifferent to the fate of the clan. Future heirs could either destroy the clan or save it. He trusted them completely. Anything that happens to the clan after death will become the responsibility of the children. Sogwan's eyes reflected a soul that had been scorched to the ground, as if he was ready to easily part with life at any moment. The next time, Sogwan brought his child and named the baby Namgung Heran. Until this moment, Choi hadn't known that Sogwan could smile so tenderly. Thus, the baby became a child of the Namgung clan. Sogwan hoped that the Namgung clan name would not become a cage for the children, and if it does, they will be ready to get rid of it and live not for the sake of the clan, but for themselves. Sogwan hoped that the elders would have the strength to look after the baby. Choi knew that they would never become part of the Namgung clan, but Sogwan called them his own daughter's brothers. The children were more like strangers and were not particularly eager to become relatives, but they became sister and brothers of Sogwan's child, Namgung Heran. Thus, bonds gradually began to develop between the children. Now they were ready to lend each other a shoulder and rush to help at any moment. Thus, Namgung Sogwan, who gave the children their name, left behind a small treasure for the Namgung family. The next evening, Choi and Woon-chun watched the sleeping baby in her bedroom. A threatening shadow of a stranger loomed over the baby's crib. It turned out to be Soren. There were abrasions on her face. Choi shared with her that his sister's nanny and the elders who were kept in the underground prison had committed suicide. Soren found out something else. The criminals did not commit suicide, they were killed. When Soren took on the task of investigating the incident, she encountered a group of hired killers carrying out a witness cleanup. There weren't many of them, but they were strong. Soren barely escaped with her life. Soren suspected that the mercenaries were using a martial arts style that emitted a red aura. It was a blood cult, the main instigator of the war that broke out 10 years ago. At that time, many righteous clans united to destroy the leader of the blood cult. However, many clan heads and heirs fell on the battlefield, causing the clan's influence to weaken. Without hard evidence, rumors of a blood cult's involvement could lead to unnecessary chaos, which would put the Namgung family in a difficult position. Due to the war with the blood cult, the Namgung family was weakened more than others, and in its current state, it was not ready to withstand such a threat from outside. It was decided to lay low for 10 years, and during this time, restore the former greatness of the Namgung family. After Kanwoo gave the baby a doll, all the other family members came to an agreement to take turns caring for the little sister. These were peaceful and quiet days, filled with a calm routine. But the little girl was bored. But the little girl had her dear chatterbox So-So, always ready to share the latest gossip. But because of his serious mood, Choi So-So is afraid to say an unnecessary word. She couldn't afford to just talk to the child while the head was putting so much effort into work. Therefore, the little girl learned to get up without help and entertained herself by reading. The council's reports contained a lot of interesting information, from coverage of politics in Anhui province to what was happening in the Muram alliance. The little girl found a note from the Red Jade Trading Guild asking for payment for the swords and agreeing to use an IOU. Most of the elder conspirators have already been dealt with, but in the past, the Namgung clan was unable to pay for weapons due to the consequences of corruption. The Red Jade Merchant Guild accepted promissory notes without issue, but when the Namgung family was in financial crisis, the blood cult took over the debt collection. If the debt could not be paid immediately, the cult was ready to take one of the clan's businesses in exchange. The Red Jade Guild colluded with the Iron Blood Alliance, betraying the Namgung clan. The alliance immediately began to appropriate everything that the Namgung family had at the time, piece by piece. Heron remembered how the daughter of the Iron Blood Alliance leader, Nasorin, invited her to the Azure Cloud Pavilion that had been taken from the Namgung family. Nasorin informed Haran that the pavilion with a luxurious view was given to the alliance by a lucky chance. Haran was outraged by how the IOU and the subsequent appropriation of other people's things by the alliance were called a happy accident. Haran was shamed by the daughter of the alliance leader. At that time, Haran did not yet know that the alliance was connected to the blood cult, and under their instructions, everything that remained of the Namgung clan was slowly being destroyed. Now, Haran suspected that the Red Jade Trading Guild might be involved in the betrayal. Choi was invited by Elder Sa, but the older brother could not leave his little sister unattended and called her along with him. But Haran refused. She was more interested in continuing to read the papers. The problem was with the documents sent by the guild, so the little girl decided to make it so that Choi couldn't put his seal on them. The little girl selflessly ruined the documents, feeling relieved, until another document caught her eye. It was a document from the merchant guild that Namgung Wunshin had mentioned in Heron's past life. They wrote that they had heard about the search for a supplier of medications after the recent infamous shameful incident. They intended to assist the family in order to strengthen further ties between the Golden Libra and the Namgung clan. Amidst the chaos that reigned among the ranks of the merchant guilds, when each wanted to unite with the blood cult, only the Golden Libra remained loyal to the Namgung clan. It is one of the 3 largest trading guilds, so it has been able to remain true to the righteous path. In the papers, they mentioned the poisoning of Unchon and seemed to say that they were aware of all the family's affairs and were ready to enter into an alliance. Heron did not like this attitude. Choi appeared behind her and asked why she had made a mess. In Choi's eyes, his sister was a smart child. She clearly showed what she liked and what she didn't, and this was the first time she had done something like this. There must be a reason for this. My sister didn't do anything for no reason. Choi picked up his sister and asked her to tell her next time not to get her hands dirty. Heron nodded in agreement, and Choi smiled. The little girl promised to find another way to inform her brother about danger. In the evening, Choi met the head of the council at the estate. Park Jinchul said he was ready to give a report. He was injured. During one of the battles, the enemy used a curious ability, and when Jinchul looked at it, he couldn't help but remember the old days of war. Before becoming the head of the council, he led the Heavenly Lightning Squad and was involved in dark deeds as part of it. This led Choi to the conclusion that those hiding in the Southern Palace were the blood cult. They fought just as dirty, sending spies everywhere to fill the clans and cults with their people. After this, they used the victims as they pleased and destroyed them when they became useless. These were Jinchul's words. He was worried that they wouldn't be enough for the Murim alliance, but Choi decided to tell everything. The Namgung clan had been nurturing snakes under its wing for almost 30 years, and there was no guarantee that the Murim alliance would escape the same fate. Choi urged the leader to go over to the Namgung clan's side. Jinchul complied with the request to spy because he understood the importance of what was happening, but he refused to side with the clan. The council must remain neutral. The children of the Namgung family were in danger, and knowing about it and not intervening could make Jinchul responsible for the consequences. Choi recalled the pact that was made with him when he became the head of the Namgung clan. According to the oath, the council is obligated to carry out Namgun's orders unless it would cause potential harm to the clan. The council would have to follow the oath. Regardless of the principle of neutrality, the document bore the signatures of all the heads of the great clans. If the council leader takes over this part of the job, Anchan will be able to focus on other things to develop a cover. This will allow Choi to spend more time with her little sister. Choi was counting on help from Chief Park. The leader reasoned that he should have refused, so that he wouldn't have been stuck in the estate for 4 years, carrying out the orders of the leader of Namgung. Next to him sat the grown-up little Heroine. She was 5 years old. She complained about her family's overprotectiveness, and the boy who had been sending her letters for several years, asking about her health, her mood, was the young master of the Tang clan. Heroine learned to write and decided to answer him, but the letter disappeared along with the envelope. Then Kanvu came and asked me to write a letter to him so that he could help find what had disappeared. Heroine knew that he was the one who hid the letter and was just making fun of her. Then the other brothers and sister appeared. They also wanted personal letters from the little girl. The little girl rewrote the letter again and immediately ordered it to be sent to the Tang clan. Jinchul said that the little girl could have written to the younger one, and everything would have been resolved without any fuss. But Heron knew that then her family would have been offended. Heroine was worried that her family was overprotective of her, despite their busy schedules. The eldest brother didn't eat without the baby. Soren couldn't visit her sister because of work. The second brother was sick, but still took on new challenges. The little girl was worried that her brothers and sister could become seriously ill because of their work. Jinchul thought that Heron was the youngest and a spoiled child, but now he saw how she cared for her elders. Her family was so deeply immersed in their work that the little girl came to the old man every day. So talked about internal family matters. So the little girl needed someone with news about the outside world, and old man Jinchul was perfect. Heron didn't know what organization he was associated with or what he did, but he had a lot of connections, so he was very useful. It was worth putting a little pressure on him, and Jinchul would immediately tell everything. The little girl was distracted from her thoughts by Kanvu. He was looking for the little girl to show her something important. It was a tree. Kanwu climbed to the very top and called Haran to follow him. The baby turned to leave, but Kanvu picked her up in his arms. Together with the baby, Kanvu climbed a tree, where he found a house hidden in the crowns. It offered a beautiful view of the lake, and the little girl came closer to get a better look. Kanvu carefully hugged the little girl protectively. He didn't test the strength of the small balcony, and was worried that his little sister might get hurt. The baby started laughing, and Kanvu blushed, embarrassed by his concern. He sat down next to his little sister and asked how she was feeling. He knew that when Haran was sad, she would sit by the toy box and sort through the toys. The little girl's birthday was coming up soon, and Kanvu asked her with a smile to relax. After her birthday, the little girl was expected to learn how to handle a sword. The little girl was worried that she would not be able to master the sword technique. Kanvu couldn't understand his sister's concern, since every member of the clan knew how to handle weapons. If Haran had said something like this to her older brother, he would have assured her that her worries were groundless and that she could do anything. The brother and sister would say the same thing and encourage the little girl. But she needed the opinion of Kanvu, who lived life to the fullest and could give her an honest answer. He said that his sister shouldn't worry. Martial arts won't make her someone else. She will remain herself. Kanwu promised that he would always be there to protect his little sister. Even without martial arts, Heroine would still be herself. She was never just a sword demon who wanted nothing more than to fight. The little girl was still troubled by the old man's words about the problems that the Red Jade Guild was bringing to the clan. She knew someone who could help her cope, but she wasn't sure about the method. Now she was experiencing life differently. Haran couldn't just go back to the documents, now that she had a security guard who was getting on her nerves. He was so correct that he didn't let Heron go anywhere, fearing that she could cause a real disaster. The young guard could not allow the little girl to get hurt or be in danger. Since he became a guard, he spent all his free time with the baby and was able to learn what kind of person Namgung Heron was. The baby was the youngest member of the Namgung family, surrounded by care and prosperity. The young guard couldn't understand why Haran acted as if she had nothing left in her soul. She was so selfless. Haran entered her elder brother's chambers and found him not in his place. Behind her, the vase suddenly began to shake. The vase might have been shaking because of a draft, or because Brother Unshin had started taking poison again. The little girl reached for the vase to check it out. But then Unshin entered the room. The little girl shuddered and dropped the golden vase. Unshin grabbed her by the shoulder and turned her towards him. He said he didn't teach Haran to take other people's things whenever she wanted. Unshin's gaze frightened Namgung. Her brother looked at her the same way he had in his past life, with disgust. In the darkness of her room, Namgung reassured herself that her brother had behaved this way because he was scared. Usually her brother never got angry and was caring. Normally, he would have immediately rushed to Haran's side to make sure she wasn't hurt. Namgung's brother's reaction made her lose her temper, and she asked him why he was getting angry over such a trifle. She should have apologized to her brother for her outburst, but the words stuck in her throat. The guard, like the maid Soso, was concerned about Namgung's condition. He advised Haran to talk to the second young master. The baby was not ready to talk yet. She was not afraid of his anger and believed that Unshan would never raise his voice at her. So the disappointment of her brother's scream hit Namgung so hard that she couldn't hold back her tears. She couldn't remember when she began to rely on and trust Unshan so much. The little girl asked the guard if he would still be by her side if she failed to learn martial arts, failed in her studies, and became useless. Chusekan said that a person's dignity is not determined by his success. He advised Namgung to go to her loved ones and tell them everything. Namgung said she was hungry. Sukun said with a smile that he would convey little Soso's wish. When the guard left, Namgung thought that she had started her life from scratch during these 4 years. She thought that this time everything would be different, but she couldn't forget the look that Unshin gave her. Namgung wondered how Unshan would react when, on her 5th birthday, everyone again found out that the little girl was incapable of learning martial arts. He will get angry or start to despise the baby. A deep-seated fear haunted the little girl. She trembled with anxiety, but continued to convince herself that everything would be fine. After some time, this day finally came. Every year, these banquets were filled with guests, everyone dropping what they were doing to congratulate the little girl. Just when Haran had gotten used to the comfort, the day came that would end her peaceful life. Choi asked where the baby wanted to sit. Soren and Unshan sat next to each other and waited for her answer. The little girl hid behind Choi and said that she should stay away from her brother Unchan. Choi solemnly thanked the guests for their presence at the celebration on the occasion of his sister's birthday. Everyone rushed to congratulate the little girl and say how the young lady had grown. Haran still felt awkward seeing his brother. The little girl hadn't seen her sister for a long time either. She didn't answer her letters or visit her. Even Namgung Kangwoo was unusually quiet today. Haran couldn't understand why her younger brother was so tense. Meanwhile, the floor was given to the head of the Namgung clan council and the delegation from the council. They brought many gifts for the young lady and hoped that she would like them. For the little girl, the head was just a grandfather, not the chairman of the council. The little girl realized that the bosses the chief was complaining about were her older brothers. The guests asked the little girl to come forward. The moment that Haran had dreaded most had arrived. Recognition and doubt, admiration and joy. Haran was filled with an ocean of emotions as she was led to the center of the hall. To learn martial arts, it was necessary to control one's internal energy. The master stood behind Haran and said that he would pass his impulse on to her and asked her to concentrate and remember the flow of energy passing through her internal points. Haran felt a warmth inside her, a familiar energy flowing through her. Suddenly, the baby started coughing up blood. The master said that Haran would not be able to master martial arts. All of her internal points, meridians, were blocked, making it impossible to control internal energy through them. Shouts came from all sides. Was it really possible that a direct descendant of the Namgung family was incapable of martial arts? Haran couldn't understand why she thought that this time would be different. As in the past, these words became tantamount to a death sentence. The banquet hall, intended for celebration and joy, was filled with cries of surprise and protest. Haran couldn't see the expressions on her family's faces, but she remembered very well what would happen in the next minute. Amidst loud screams, Heron rushed out of the hall. The guests continued to whisper. Elder O could not believe that a direct descendant of the Namgung clan was not capable of learning martial arts. The head of the council interrupted the shouts of Elder O. Elder O lost his temper, as it was the council's leader who was responsible for teaching martial arts, and he blamed the entire council. With a smile, Unshin asked if the elder really believed that the untalented members of the clan were no longer considered descendants of the Namgung clan. Soren said threateningly that the newly appointed elder was very worried about the baby, but he should be worried about himself. Kanwoo asked what right the elder had to judge who was worthy of being part of the clan and who was not. He broke his cane and was indignant. No one could trample his little sister into the mud at the festival. Choi gently interrupted Kangwoo's indignation. The guests continued to insist that Heron Namgung would now lose the clan's respect. Choi understood that those around him thought that his affection for his sister would weaken due to her inability to learn martial arts. For Choi it was funny. He reached for his sword. The guests tensed up as Choi calmly scolded them for their obscene remarks about his sister. They had 5 days to apologize to their sister. While the baby cried in her room, her brothers and sister were ready to sacrifice their honor and destroy their relationship with the clan. Kanwoo was indignant. He couldn't understand why his brothers and sister didn't publicly stand up for their younger sister. Soren accused Kanwoo of exactly the same inaction. The usual squabble ensued between Kanwoo and Soren. Soren asked Choi why he didn't intervene. Choi rubbed his neck in embarrassment and admitted that he was at a loss. Unchan admitted that he was worried that his words would escalate the situation. Soren didn't stand up for her sister, as she wanted to give the guests a dressing down first. Soren spent whole days in the infirmary, smelling of blood, the smell of which she tried to hide with perfume. Choi realized that his sister, despite his request, continued to go on night patrols. The family decided to first calm their sister down rather than figure out who had the reasons. Kanwoo excitedly reminded her that it was his sister's birthday today and suggested showering her with gifts and throwing her a party that would make her forget all her worries. So came into the room and asked if the baby was back. So assumed that something bad had happened to the baby. Haran looked around her old room, empty and abandoned, just like it had been in her past life. This time, all her relatives also turned their backs on the little girl. Nothing changed. She was worried that So and Siken would stop respecting her. Haran knew it would happen. She tried her best to accept the outcome, but she still felt hurt by her brothers and sisters' indifference. The little girl was upset. The family said that she was their favorite, and they would always be there for her. Namgung felt most hurt for Kangwoo. He promised to always be by her side. Haran promised herself that she wouldn't build castles in the air and made the same mistake again. The door creaked open. It was a wolf! He began to circle around the baby. The wolf sniffed the frightened Haran, and then he jumped on her and began to gently rub his nose against her cheek. The wolf's fur was all dirty, and Haran thought that he had been abandoned just like her. She hugged the wolf cub and said that a long time ago she fought with the blood cult and heard something. In the apostate cults, the Namgung clan was considered the easiest victim. This was confirmed when they managed to falsely accuse Namgung Heron of poisoning. The blood cult member said that no one would stand up for Heron, so the Iron Blood Alliance was able to crush the Namgung clan. When Haran heard these words, she felt an unbearable sense of guilt. The broken expectations of others made her an outcast in the Namgung family. She became the weakest point of the clan, which destroyed it. Namgung asked the wolf to stay and live with her. She was sure that she would be abandoned again and would cause the death of her family. Namgung hoped until the very end that she would not have to sell anything, so she kept things dear to her heart, full of memories, in a drawer. Haran wanted her family to always be close. The feeling of loneliness and betrayal made the little girl cry. Even after her reincarnation, her dream remained unfulfilled. Suddenly she was called, and Haran turned around with tears in her eyes. A tearful Soren ran into the room. Soren felt guilty and worried that the baby had run away due to her family's indifference. Soren admitted that she avoided Heron because she was injured during the last raid and didn't want to worry the baby. Soren hugged Haran and called her her most precious treasure. The little girl burst into tears because Soren did not answer her letters for a long time and remained distant. Canva witnessed a touching scene. He immediately took the baby in his arms and became worried that Soren had offended her. The little girl tearfully said that her older sister was not to blame. Kanvu hugged the baby to himself to calm her down. Haran couldn't resist and admitted that she was worried, because Kanwu hadn't even smiled at her once that evening. Kanvu was ashamed because the little girl almost fell out of the tree due to his carelessness. Kanwu was worried that Heron would get into trouble again if he was around. Unchun entered the bedroom. He admitted that he was beside himself and terribly regretted his breakdown. He thought he should have calmly explained to the little girl what was going on, instead of yelling over nothing. Unchun vowed to never scold the baby again. The little girl hugged Unchun and forgave him. The family admitted that there was nothing wrong with Heron's lack of talent for martial arts. If she had a desire to learn, Choi was ready to turn the whole world upside down to help the little girl. Choi encouraged Heron not to be afraid to make mistakes and stumble. He promised to always stand by his little sister's side. The family ties between the family only grew stronger at this moment. Suddenly, the little girl remembered her new friend. The wolf looked after the baby with disappointment and whined. Haran looked at her older brother with hope. She asked to take the wolf with her and give him shelter. Kangwoo and Choi looked at Heron with confusion. Kanvu pulled the dog away from the baby, worried that he was infested with fleas. The dog turned out to have a collar. It had the name Haran on it. Namgung looked at her brother with disbelief when he said her name. Choi admitted that the dog was his birthday present to his younger sister. The family members looked at their older brother in surprise. The dog turned out to be a mystical beast, the Yunnan snow wolf. In the eyes of the family, the dog did not look like a mystical beast. He seemed like an ordinary mongrel. Now the worst days were behind us. The little girl did not feel abandoned. Her life turned out completely differently. The baby was unable to learn martial arts, so she became the weak point of the Namgung clan. There were always those who would want to attack the little girl from behind, but in this case, she had a plan. She was ready to crush them first. The little girl calmly drank tea in the company of her irreplaceable guardian. Suddenly, a man burst into the room screaming. Heroine wasn't scared, because her brother had built a window with a beautiful view in her room, so that it would be clear who to let in and who not. The guard politely asked the man to leave, but he replied that he had waited too long. It was Ryu Gahyo of the Gahyo clan. He was in charge of the Heavenly Star Trading Guild, which was controlled by the Nimgung clan. He came to apologize for the incident at the banquet. He was from the richest clan, and Namgung thought with anticipation how much compensation she could squeeze out of him. His assistant brought in a large chest. The chest contained a lot of jewelry and valuables. Haran said that this would not be enough as an apology. Ryu Gayo didn't expect such an answer. He insulted Namgung in front of everyone. He hurt the little girl, her brothers and sister, with his words. The little girl refused the gift and drove the old man away. The man from the Gayo clan began to boil with anger. Meanwhile, Kanvu entered the room. He had just washed the wolf. The wolf and Kanvu turned to the old man with indignation. The baby and the guard immediately told Kanwu that the representative of the Gahyo clan had insulted the baby. The easily seething Kanvu was outraged. He was ready to defend the honor of his younger sister under any circumstances. The status of his opponent was unimportant to him. The little girl, with a sly smile, said that she would forgive the old man if he could defeat Kanva. The old man enthusiastically agreed, but he couldn't defeat the young master. Kanwu was very proud of himself and enjoyed the sight of the defeated old man. The little girl enthusiastically got ready to count the old man's debt. The condition was victory over Kanvu, but the old man lost, which meant he had to fork out. The first price was 50,000 gold coins. The old man offered to make a list of everyone who owed Haran an apology, and in return asked for a reduction in the amount of the debt. The little girl did not agree and asked for a separate list, but the list was well compiled, and the little girl appreciated the old man's efforts. Namgung asked to name the most simple and narrow-minded of them. The old man continued listing, and Haran asked if it wouldn't be easier for him to pay off with money. The little girl offered him to complete some of her tasks to reduce the amount of the debt. The old man asked if the little girl's request was known to the young masters and the head of the Namgung clan. The little girl hid her request from her elders, but told the old man that they knew everything. The old man agreed to arrange a meeting for the little girl with one of the offenders, Oh Yang-gyeon. The guild leader warned that Oh Yang-yong had a difficult character and could try to harm Heron. The little girl was nervous before meeting Oh Yang-yong, but everything went smoothly. Ryu Gahyo was surprised, because Yang-yeon, who was known for his bad temper, took the meeting with the little girl calmly. Yang-yeon admitted that just yesterday he believed that a direct descendant of the Namgung family could not help but have talent for martial arts. During the meeting, the little girl told him that she could not learn to fight, but she valued her clan no less than her brothers and sister and wished it prosperity. She knew countless ways to lead the Namgung family to success. In response, Yang-yeon admitted that he loved the Namgung clan with all his heart and was proud of it. Heron assured that her love for the clan was no weaker than Yang-yeon's love. She asked Yang-yeon to prove his love and loyalty to the Namgung clan, apologize to her, and take responsibility for the hurtful words he said. Then the Namgung clan will shine brighter than all the stars in the sky. Heron's words gave Yang-yeon hope. Choosing Yang-yeon as an ally was risky, but Heron had her own reasons for it. In his past life, he was fierce and arrogant, but his loyalty to the clan was unquestionable. He loved the Namgung family so much that he was nicknamed the Namgung clan dog. If Yang-yeon takes the data from Ryu Ga-hyun and does everything as needed, Heron will be able to get rid of the interference within the family. The little girl decided that it was time to move on to the next part of the plan. Uncle Ryu entered the room and asked the little girl again if she had received the consent of the head of the family. Haran lied to him again. The guard could only sigh heavily and support the young lady's ideas. The little girl took the matter seriously and was ready to start getting rid of traitors in the clan. Therefore, I asked Ryu to bring the head of the Anhui branch, the second disciple of the master of the cult of the Asking Hand, Elder Chui Gyolj. The little girl asked Sekyeon and Ryu to leave her alone with the elder. The deal with the Red Jade Guild fell through. They began to nitpick the details of the documents related to the Golden Libra Guild and the Namgung clan while spreading rumors. At first, they were not listened to, but one day the cult of the Asking Hand sided with the Red Jade and gave weight to all the words and rumors. The little girl remembered this when she saw the documents on her sister's desk. The solution to all the problems that Grandpa Bayek complained about lay with Heron, a member of the Asking Hand cult, Choi Gyulge. He asked if it was really the little girl who had been digging into the affairs of the past and dared to call him here. Haran wrote to him that she knew about what happened 10 years ago on the night of the full moon and urged him to meet her so that everything would remain a secret. The little girl admitted that it was her doing. At first, she couldn't believe it, because it all sounded absurd and stupid. But Gulga's reaction showed that the story was true. The jug of drink almost fell out of the girl's hands. The adult Haran then urged the lord to drink more carefully, because the battle would continue at dawn. The mistress was a disciple of the beggar sect, so Gyolj, Choi Gyolja's student from the past, Heron, was one of the few people who brightened Namgung's loneliness. The lady challenged Haran to a drinking race with her, and in exchange for winning, to tell her her real name. The lady promised that if she lost, she would tell her master's terrible secret. Thanks to her resistance to alcohol, Heron was able to outdrink Seo Gyulg that day, and she learned the secret that the master had kept for 10 whole years. The secret was simple. Choi Gyulg stole the cult leader's stash, opened it, and shamelessly ate it in one go. The secret did not belong to Choi Gyulg, but to the head of the cult, so it was kept in the strictest confidence. Haran had another plan in case the master was not convinced by the revealed secret. Choi Gyulg secretly used money begged on the streets, all to feed the orphans who remained after the war with the blood cult. Gyulg agreed. He already wanted to break off relations with the Red Jade Guild. The decision to sever ties with the guild surprised Haran. The people the guild is associated with have recently started to behave strangely. They gathered small cults around themselves, forming a semblance of an alliance. The rumors spread by the Red Jade Guild are directly related to the Namgung clan, which has enormous influence in the province. They had no official name, but were formed around the Iron Blood cult, so they could be called the Iron Blood Alliance. Haran waited for the alliance to enter the game and was happy. She wanted to finish with the affairs within the clan and begin to carry out terrifying revenge on those who had offended her. Namgung gathered everyone who had behaved suspiciously in the main hall of the estate, under the pretext of giving them a last chance to apologize. Oh Yang began to act according to plan and enrage the guests with his shouts about the injustice of the Namgung family's decision. Everyone began to support Yang and condemn the actions of the clan and the baby. The plan began to be executed. Heron called it a hunting tactic with Oh Yang, the Namgung family's dog. Choi ordered the arrest of all those who supported Yang and their transfer to cells. The guests began to shout about injustice and try to prove how devotedly they served the Namgung clan. But the clan's decision was final. Choi said that doubting his younger sister's abilities showed how weak the strength of everyone who said such terrible things was. Choi knew that the seventh elder visited brothels, and Captain Gu Yang acquired a rare sword on the black market. They used the influence and resources of the Namgung family for selfish purposes and indulged in corruption and debauchery. All this time, they have been playing into the hands of the unholy cults, the Dark Alliance. Thanks to them, the wealth and property of the Namgung clan, which always adhered to the true path, fell directly into the hands of the Dark Alliance. The mention of the Dark Alliance made Soren quite angry. Choi said that the younger sister found a way to stop the rumors that the Red Jade Guild was spreading and solved the problem. The clan leader called for an answer as to who had truly served the Namgung family faithfully all this time, the untalented sister or the traitors to the true path. The brother and sister clearly planned this entire performance in advance. Haran thought that now the traitors would feel what it was like for her to live in the past. Everyone around her, including her family members, despised her, subjecting her to ridicule, and eternal doubt. She had to wander from house to house, finding no shelter anywhere. It was a miserable and maddening life. But now everything was different. Today, nothing will remain of the clan's former foundations, and Haran will say goodbye to negative emotions, ridicule, bullying, and shame. Soren said it was time to begin a new part of the evening. So and the young guard were moving the chests. Beautiful music was playing. It was a new birthday celebration for Heron. Kanvu appeared in front of his little sister and congratulated her. Haran's birthday had already passed, and she was surprised to be celebrated again. The brothers tried very hard to arrange a new and real holiday for the little girl. Kanvu led the little girl to the gifts. They were kept in a pavilion named after Haran. Now the little girl owned the entire building. The family built an entire building to make Haran feel comfortable. Choi waited with a smile for the little girl's reaction. She was very happy. Haran immediately asked if she could bring the dog and the snake she had recently found here. She found her barely alive on her way home, and then treated her, gave her water and food. Heron and Choi's conversation was interrupted by Unchan. He asked if the black snake, as thick as a little finger, was the same one that Namgung had picked up. It was her. It was a gift that Unchan, a 1,000-year-old black poisonous viper, had prepared in advance. Unchan decided that the dangerous and poisonous snake would be an excellent guard for his sister, and he kept it in a jug for a long time to tame it. The viper had been living in the vessel that Heron wanted to examine all this time, and that was why Unchan scolded her then. Soren scolded the careless Unchan for such a dangerous gift. The dog looked at Haran pitifully. The little girl couldn't share time with the silver wolf because she was busy. A lot of people were thrown out of the mansion. There was a shortage of workers, so the little girl had a lot of work to do. But for the sake of the dog, Heron was willing to devote a little time to play. However, the young guard forbade Haran to be distracted from her work. Haran came up with names for her animals. The older brothers gave the little girl sacred animals. My sister brought strange eggs, and Kanvu caught a wild mountain ferret for the sake of the baby. The pets were precious gifts to the family, so Haran put her heart and soul into giving them worthy names. The guard assumed that Haran had finished her business for the day, so he came to report on the results of the task the little girl had entrusted to him. The guard claimed that he saw everything with his own eyes. He asked if the little girl really wanted to go there without telling anyone. The baby assured me that everything would be fine. Kanvu, who appeared nearby, asked why the little girl had brought the guard with her. The young man was not delighted with the company of the third gentleman. Kanvu knew the city well, so he could guide the little girl and her guard to the right place. Haran took Kanwa with her, so that her family wouldn't scold her. But with him, the likelihood of an unforeseen incident increased exponentially. Kanwu and Haran waited patiently for the young guard. He went with them because he knew that two troublemakers could not be left alone without supervision. He had a bad feeling. Kanvu showed the little girl the market that she had long wanted to see. The little girl felt sick because she had to climb over the fence. It was impossible to go through the main entrance. Otherwise, onlookers would immediately gather and ruin the plan by announcing to everyone about the younger Namgung. The little girl wanted to walk quietly through the market. Shokin sighed. He had nothing to say in response. Kanwu and Haran sat on the ground and devoured delicious steamed buns. Haran called over the orphans who were peeking around the corner. She offered them food, steamed bun in exchange for interesting stories. One of the orphans whispered that such a noble lady would not be interested in stories. The little girl wanted to hear rumors, ghost stories, or answers to her questions. The girls asked what exactly the young lady wanted to know. The little girl asked if they knew where the abode of darkness was. No matter how hard the Iron Blood Alliance tries to wrest a piece of the Namgung family's influence, it is nothing more than a collection of small cults. However, the alliance suddenly and unexpectedly gained strength, thanks to one event that was about to happen. The grandson of the emperor's chief tutor, whom the ruler himself adored, was kidnapped. A mysterious group called the Abode of Darkness was behind the kidnapping. If Haran remembered correctly, their base was in a quiet corner, and they used children as messengers, whose deaths would not arouse suspicion. Those children who stood before Haran now could lead straight to the Abode of Darkness. The first thing Heron wanted was to get her grandson out so that the laurels would go into the hands of the Namgung family, and the alliance would receive a strong slap in the face to its reputation. Haran wanted to kill two birds with one stone. The children asked fearfully if the little girl really wanted to go to the Abode of Darkness with her companions. For these terrible people, human life was equivalent to the life of an insect. Recently, they even began to kidnap children. Haran, Kanwu, and Sekyong found the base of the Dark Abode by following the children. The children's warnings only motivated the little girl to stop her enemies. Kanwu asked if the little girl was seriously planning to break into the enemy's place. The little girl was ready to do anything to stop the kidnapping of children. The heirs of the Namgang clan could not allow such a disgrace to occur in Anhui province. The children sent a message via snakes to the Namgung clan to warn the family. Heron had thought of this from the very beginning. Kanwu admired his sister's resourcefulness and promised to cover her rear. Haran started teasing her brother. Meanwhile, at the gates of the monastery, strangers were talking about the unexpectedly appearing leaders. The grandson of the emperor's tutor was kidnapped. Among the children they grabbed was that same boy. The man thought about selling the children as soon as possible. An accomplice interrupted his thoughts. He asked to send a message to the head of the Pure Moon cult. His help might be needed when transporting the children. It turns out that the righteous cult of the Pure Moon was mixed up with the wicked. The head of the Clear Moon sect was always close to the head of the Iron Blood Alliance. But in reality, he acted behind his back. The leader became more brazen after receiving the position of Na Soren's guard. Haran always found it strange that such a weak group as the Alliance managed to save the Imperial teacher. It is likely that the Dark Abode was originally allied with the Iron Blood Alliance. They saved the child they themselves had kidnapped. There were two doors at the entrance. The little girl suggested that she and Kanwu split up and check both doors. Kanvu couldn't let his little sister go alone. But he agreed, in danger. Haran had to wait for the moment when he would save her. Behind the door, Namgung Cho's was a prison. She asked the captives if there was a boy named Seomun Yunho among them. The children did not know a boy with this name. Haran introduced herself and said that she had come to rescue the captive children. A small palm shot up among the children's hands. It was Seomun Yunho. He asked how the little girl knew about his location. Haran asked the boy not to worry and promised to rescue him. The little girl got hold of an innovative development of the Namgung family from one of the clan's most talented masters, a master key. During the time when Haran was known as the Sword Demon, she often made a living by picking locks. There were no strong locks for her. She promised to quickly pick the lock. The boy watched with excitement as Haran used the master key. Finally, the lock gave way and clicked. Unfamiliar voices began to be heard from the corridor. Yunho immediately pulled Heron into his cell to hide her. The frightened children fell on top of each other. Heron's beautiful dream of saving Seomun Yunho in the Great Way was dashed. Haran clenched her fists. If only she knew martial arts. Then she would be able to smash the camera to pieces. And I would have given all the kidnappers a beating. But the little girl was too arrogant, so she missed her chance. She was a simple child who had no talent for martial arts. As an adult, Haran heard that she was too impatient and could learn if she gave herself more time. Haran couldn't believe that she would have learned martial arts if she had waited a little longer. The master urged everyone to listen to him carefully. Haran's 9th yin meridian was blocked, so her body was unable to accumulate and release internal energy. Haran had never felt a single grain of energy in herself, let alone the 9th yin meridian. But now the meridian was almost healed. Typically, the 1,000-year-old furious fox techniques were used to treat such cases, and most people died due to the clash of yin and yang energies. The one who treated Heron specifically set restrictions so that Namgung would not be harmed in the process. This man transferred some of his own energy to Heron to prevent the yin and yang conflict and ensure a slow healing. If Haran tries to concentrate the internal energy, it will rely on the yang element. So only after the yin is restored will the restriction be lifted. So Haran was left waiting helplessly again. The kidnappers stood in front of the camera. They were looking for a child named Seomun Yunho, but they didn't know what he looked like. Heron stood up and said that she was Seomun Yunho. The kidnappers were surprised. They couldn't believe that the grandson of the imperial teacher was dressed like a girl. They said they came to save Seomun Yunho. One of the kidnappers admitted that he had expected better manners and pulled the baby towards him by the collar. First, he decided to teach her some manners. The little girl covered herself with her hands, expecting the blow. The man was holding his bloody side. Soren hugged the baby to herself, lowering her sword. No one had the right to touch the youngest daughter of the Namgung clan. Faint smell of ink, the subtle scent of lotus flowers, and a familiar manner of hugging. It was definitely Soren's sister who came to the baby's aid. In the Namgung clan, only 2 stood out for their outstanding martial prowess: the graceful and formidable sword of Choi Namgung, and the unbridled sky-slicing blade of Gangwoo Namgun. But no one spoke about the phoenix art of Soren Namgung, who most often looked after the household. She urged the little girl to stay put and promised to return soon. The little girl grabbed her sister by the clothes and stopped her. Soren seriously planned to fight the leader of the unorthodox sect alone. Even Choi and Kangwoo risked their lives to fight the leader. Soren could have been injured or even died in the fight with him. Soren asked the little girl not to get worked up and not to think about the danger. She was only interested in whether the kidnapper had threatened the baby. Haran nodded. Soren smiled softly in response. She raised her sword and called on the kidnapper to drop his weapon so that she would spare his life. He refused. Thunderous energy flashed. Haran remembered the conversations. They always called her a boar. It was said that the precious Miss Namgung clan had a golden neck since she could not bow down for her mistakes. Haran found this strange. All those who mocked Namgung in any way or tried to intimidate her were struck by lightning and left crippled for life. It was so inexplicable that it seemed like divine punishment. Haran always believed that heaven was on her side, but divine punishment was always her sister. She always looked after her younger sister, and she protected her from behind, eliminating her offenders. Haran's doubts were cleared away, so now everything was crystal clear to her. She was too young and proud to admit it. And now I finally saw the true strength and character of my sister, her selfless love. She won this battle too. The little girl hugged Soren gratefully. She now understood how much Soren had done for her. Sester called out to Canva. For a moment, Haran forgot that she was no longer alone, that there were those who were ready to risk their lives for her. She wanted to change something in herself, to become more accommodating, so that her loved ones would stop suffering because of her. Choi hugged the baby and calmed her down. However, the baby refused to go home. She wanted to escort the imperial teacher's grandson and all the innocent children home, and to accept those who had no family into the Namgung clan. As always, Haran was worried about others first. The monastery was filled with children's laughter. Kanvu put the baby on his back and carried her home. A child's hand tugged modestly at Haran's clothes. The baby clarified the name of his savior. He asked why Haran had put herself in danger and pretended to be him. He thanked the little girl and promised to definitely repay the debt. Haran agreed with a smile. Residence of the imperial teacher. The little boy was asked why he left the house in a woman's dress. The baby caused concern throughout the entire estate. He was only pretending to be Seoman Yunho. The real one was talking to him now. The boy agreed to exchange letters with the youngest daughter of the Namgung clan, and the little girl teased him. Yuno asked if Haran was as beautiful as they said. The kid blushed and admitted that it was true. Thanks to past determination, time flew by. The little girl looked around in confusion. The forest she found herself in was unfamiliar and looked strange. The little girl became worried that she was starting to have visions. After all, they couldn't leave her alone. The animal ghost suddenly pressed itself against Haran's leg and startled her. Transparent images and visions began to appear around. The visions were too realistic to be a dream, and the little girl thought she had fallen under the influence of a spell. The visions made her uneasy. It felt as if Haran's whole life was flashing before her eyes. She began to remember. The last thing she remembered was Unshan suddenly falling down. He was seriously ill, and without the elixir, there was no hope. To save him, Haran followed the memories of her past life and needed to find the legendary herb. She even argued with Kanvu, who insisted on going with her. Haran squeezed into the right crevice, and she filled the vessel with the elixir. Was this a vision of the Grass Guardian? In her past life, Haran had heard a lot about this place, but she had never been there and didn't know what to expect. The baby decided to wait for her family. She was still powerless and could not cope alone. Suddenly, a familiar voice was heard. It was Kanwu's voice. Due to the fog, the little girl slipped and fell. Haran fell from a great height, but she didn't feel any pain at all. Her body grew again. There was a forest around from the vision, but now it felt different, more real. It turns out it was all a dream, but reality hasn't changed at all. It made sense, because her brothers were kind. The family became close-knit. The life in which Haran wasn't abandoned due to her lack of fighting skills was just a dream. A fleeting dream of what Haran desired most. The dream still lived in Haran's heart. Suddenly, Haran was called out. A stately man appeared from behind the trees. He said that the guild leader offered Haran two options. He asked why Namgung decided to return, giving up her happy life. Haran remembered that she was supposed to meet here with an informant introduced by the guild leader. Haran asked the man to tell her about the blood cult. He refused to tell Haran anything until she answered his question. Haran only wanted revenge and nothing more. The man asked if Haran could achieve his goal alone. Haran again asked him to give her the location of the blood clan. The man said that with her current skills, revenge was impossible for Haran. She must accept help. Her clan fell. Her family died defending Haran. No one could help her anymore. Haran felt lonely and abandoned. She belonged only to herself now. The man said that she was not alone now. A soft and warm light enveloped Haran. She opened her eyes and saw the worried faces of her family. How did it happen that Haran was in the forest, and now she couldn't move? Her hands were small again. Someone touched Haran's hand. It was Soren. She asked if the little girl remembered her. Haran sat up in bed and looked around. She asked to bring her a mirror. A grown-up girl looked back at her from the reflection. She began to look like the girl from her dream.